I know you're all watching me. I'm watching the man at the back. There it is. Okay, cool. Hello, I'm James Batchelor. I work for GamesIndustry.biz. This is 20 lessons from 20 years. I want to kind of get a little bit of pretext. You know why you're here. You're here to hear from developers, not from me. This is a look at how developers can thrive in games, like taking on lessons from the past. I've got a little bit of a preamble beforehand, just a bit of context as to how much has changed in 20 years, because a lot has changed in 20 years. Consoles, for example, used to look like this, and now they look like this. That would be a much better transition if I'd used the PS2, but any excuse to show some love for the GameCube. Mobile phones used to look like this. I kind of missed that. Now they look like this. GI has changed. This is our 20th anniversary this year. 20 years ago, we looked like this. We now look like this. We will soon look like this. Yeah, teaser. And I have changed as well. I have gone from looking like this to this. Still lost and confused, and actually still playing GoldenEye in both pictures. But let's talk about the actual industry. The industry, I mean, this is a fast-paced industry. Most industries do change a lot over 20 years, but like it's really interesting thinking about how much has changed, like just in the way that games are delivered, developed. I actually came up with this list with my team, like just off the top of my head. I think I came up with half the list. The team kind of helped me come up with the rest as well. And even then, there are ones that we had to leave out. So I'm going to try and rattle through these. Digital distribution. 20 years ago, there wasn't as much downloading, and obviously, like you had the advent of Steam and app stores and consoles have got digital distribution. Like the idea of games being tied specifically to boxes and reliant on retail, not the case anymore. We've had the democratization of development. Game engines are much more readily available. Anyone can download the likes of Unity, Unreal, all the other kind of free-to-use ones and make games. There are no barriers anymore to making your game. That has seen the rise of indie games, which have really kind of diversified the type of games that are doing. You know, it's not just like there are ones that dip into nostalgia and bring back previous types of games, but also like ones that are doing things that we even question, is it a game? Like, is it something completely different? This has been aided by self-publishing. You no longer are reliant on publishers. It helps sometimes, depending on your game, depending on the audience you're trying to get. So self-publishing has really enabled people to get their games straight to market themselves. Mobile gaming is the big one, obviously, with the invention of smartphones and the App Store in 2008, I believe. We've had a completely different type of game has emerged. That has brought about things like casual and social games. This was obviously aided as well by things like Farmville on Facebook, and that has dramatically broadened the audience. The gaming audience is broader than it's ever been before. Like that's primarily through mobile, but also things like Nintendo with its Wii and DS. Just games are for everyone is the phrase that is so often used these days. Business models have completely changed. We've seen free to play again through mobile gaming. We've seen games that are completely free to download, and then they're funded by microtransactions. There we go. Oh, it's almost like I knew that was coming. Like just the business model, like the idea of like you don't sell your game, you give your game away for free and hope that people buy stuff, or work really hard on working a way to convince people to buy stuff. Live service games that are not just finished when they are released, like games that evolve and constantly change, like not just like seasonal updates and there's an event on this weekend and it'll be gone by Monday. Like games have completely transformed, again, particularly on mobile, completely transformed from what they were when they launched. Online gaming. Obviously, there was online gaming on PCs. I don't want to upset the PC master race, but like the expansion of online gaming on consoles and mobile has brought a lot more multiplayer games to the fore. And for many people, it's kind of the default way of playing. It's playing against hundreds, if not thousands, of people. We're starting to see in the recent years. I mean, we've seen over the decades, we've seen attempts at streaming and cloud gaming, but it seems to be landing at the moment. Streaming and cloud gaming, like the idea of games being delivered in a Netflix style, so it's just all over the internet, and you don't need a console, as Samsung very proudly told me at an event I went to the other week. Subscriptions, again, another new business model. Like we've had subscriptions with MMOs, like certainly around 20 years ago, but we've gone from subscription for MMOs to subscriptions for game services like Xbox Live and PlayStation Plus, and then obviously now things like Xbox Game Pass and Luna and Stadia and all different kind of types of subscriptions. Esports were around, yes, in the 90s and the early 2000s, but they've really become it's become a whole other industry. Like the money going around in esports is insane and enough to turn a lot of executives' heads. Early access, again, this changes the way, I don't know if this was meant to be further up the list, but early access, again, changing how like developers make games. Like indies are able to build games, put them out unfinished on Steam, and even starting to do it on consoles as well, and get feedback from the community. And like, you know, their players can help shape and fix their game long before launch. That was unheard of 20 years ago. And then I've bundled them in, but like virtual reality, augmented reality, extended reality, mixed reality, even though these have been around for several years, like we still don't fully understand like the potential that they have. Like some people think these are going to be like the dominant way of interacting with the internet or the metaverse at some point. That's a whole different talk. I'm not going into that. This is how this is going to work. I have brought on some guest developers to share their biggest lessons that they've learned during the last 20 years, during the time that all this stuff has been happening. These guests are very graciously given their time. They're going to come up to the lectern. They're going to talk for about 2 to 3 minutes about something that has stuck with them through their career since 2002. I am going to stand in the corner out of the way, so you don't have to look at me, but I'm going to lurk when their time is running a little short. So please welcome my first guest. My first guest is Dinga Bakaba, Studio Director and Co-Creative Director of Arcane Studios. Dinga, thank you so much.
Thank you, and hi everyone. So my advice will be awfully simple and maybe obvious, but that doesn't mean that it's not valuable. It's about learning from your colleagues. And by that, I mean that, you know, something I observe sometimes is that young developers joining think that the old guard is out of touch, and you know, they have the new approach figured out. And on the contrary, the more senior developers are thinking that they have everything figured out, and that they don't have to learn from students and people joining the industry, etc. And by the way, one thing that did change, maybe that wasn't there, is that more and more people, I think, are entering games after a career in something else. Like I'm changing, so they come with some background, with some learning a certain approach. I think game developers are more and more diverse, hopefully, and again, they bring new perspectives. So anyway, I think that, you know, no matter where you are in your career, those interactions with colleagues, you know, trying to go toward them, talk to them, hear what they have to say, see what you agree to disagree on, which is extremely important as well. Let that perspective, you know, sink in, because quite honestly, I mean, in my experience, that is not 20 years, in my experience, I think I've learned more from those experiences, those talks with, again, more experienced, less experienced developers than I did in conferences. No offense. So yeah, I think you will learn a lot from it, and it can be done as an introvert. I'm a hardcore introvert. Voilà. Thanks everyone. I hope you again. As I said, it's maybe obvious, maybe it's a reminder, but never forget that one, because again, that's the entire point. Don't think you have everything figured out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dinga. Dinga's got a very kind of busy evening, so he's going to duck out quite rightly, because congratulations on your award for tonight, and best of luck. Have a good one. Thank you so much. Okay, next guest is not everyone could make it to Brighton, because I asked people that weren't in Brighton. So we've got a few video guests. First one is Warren Spector, who obviously we know for, you know, Deus Ex and System Shock and loads of immersive sims. This is what he had to say.
The most important lesson I've learned in 40 years of making games is this: you're only as good as your team. Despite what some people seem to think, games aren't made by one person sitting alone in a room pondering until a game springs forth from their fevered imagination. It takes a team. That much is stupidly obvious, but if you want to do something more than just make a game, if you want to do something memorable, you don't just need a team, you need a great team. One that buys into a clear vision, which is where an individual might come in. One that wants to do something great, needs to do something great. One that understands the success criteria for a game and will stop at nothing to accomplish them, and do whatever is necessary to realize those goals. And what about those success criteria? To some extent, you have to be able to measure them. It can't just be make a great game or make a fun game. Those are meaningless. Some people define success as making a ton of money or reaching a gazillion people. Others, I'm sure you're out there somewhere, define success as hitting a budget or schedule. Still others define it as advancing the state of the art in ways that influence other game makers, while still others dream of making something people will still be talking about and playing 20 years later. Some feel driven to make something a great team can look back on with pride 20 years later and hear them say, look what we did. I can't believe I was a part of that. You can probably guess where I fall with regard to possible success criteria. And even when we fail, the team and I, which, let's face it, is usually what happens even to the best teams, we have to be able to say we gave it our best shot. Life is too short, careers are too short, everything you do better have a chance of being great. So that's my lesson. Build the best team you can, made up of the best people you can, not the best people available. Make sure someone has a clear vision and can lay out appropriate success criteria. Then comes the counterintuitive part. With team, vision, and definition of success in place, get out of the way. Be the dumbest person in the room. Let the team loose as long as they don't stray from vision or success. They'll conceive and build things better than you can imagine. And that's the best measure of success I've ever experienced. Thanks for listening.
I'll email Warren and let him know you clapped. Apologies to people watching the live stream. What you missed out on Warren Spector, who's looking a lot more handsome and a lot less sweaty than I am. Okay, next up we have Brenda Romero.
Hey, I'm Brenda Romero, as the slide says. So this is my 40th year of game development. So the lesson, I find like we're all desperate for people to work with, people to join our teams. Sometimes we're desperate for publishers to pick up our games and we're really eager to get the funding or to get the people. So we all have a set of like checklist. This person or this publisher needs to be able to do the following things, ding, 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 ding. And when they check all those boxes, we're like, oh, yes, we found that person. Or this is the publisher for us. We, in the last 10 years, have instituted, with employees, and also it's important to apply with publishers, we have a secondary checklist. And the secondary checklist is, why should we not hire this person? And you can't talk about anything good, even if they've checked all the boxes. Why should we not hire this person? And now apply to, why should we not do this deal? And it's interesting that, the goal isn't to tear this person apart. This goal is to, what things did you pick up? Are there things that you think they said which might not be a great fit for our studio? Some actual examples were, well, during lunch, they mentioned that if they could run a team the way they'd want to, they'd be a dictator. Oh, that's a great point. Might not want to bring that person in. Another person mentioned their affiliation with a group that I'd consider pretty close to a hate group. And they mentioned that to another employee who they thought might be leaning in that direction. Also checked every single box on the why should we hire, but could have done all kinds of damage internally. And I find, as in my career, if I look at everybody I've ever worked with, the people who were just super standouts, who you knew were going to be with you until they went on, found their own studio, you knew you got to work with them for a little while. Every one of those people took so little time. But the people who take the most time, the publishers who take the most effort, are the ones that cause you difficulty. So you will spend far more time on your failures than you will on the great people. And so we try to root that out as quickly as we can and just not let any of that in. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Next video guest is Sam Barlow, who's game director and owner of Half Mermaid, better known for things like Her Story, Telling Lies, and the upcoming Immortality.
What's up, develop? Sam Barlow here. What has been the biggest learning for me over 20 years of video games? Well, if I think about my career, it neatly splits into two halves. There was the first half where I was doing work for hire for the bigger publishers, making boxed retail games. And the second half of my career, I've been making indie games that have been distributed digitally. And really it was that leap from the old way of distributing to this new digital distribution that really enabled me to dial into what was special about video games and kind of internalize how a video game should be made. And really it was about, so when I started out, people would tell me, you're not making the video game for yourself. It doesn't matter what you think is fun, you are not the audience. And the definition of the audience would be one that would trickle down from on high. So I would be pitching a publisher. The publisher would be pitching GameStop. And they would be deciding how many to buy, which shelves to put it on. So when it came back to me, this definition of the audience would end up being about playing to the lowest common denominator, which always seemed particularly wrong in regards to how to make a video game. So in 2015, when I went indie and I put out Her Story, part of the experiment there was in seeing if I made a game that was very particular and very specific, could we then find an audience, a large audience for that? And the success of Her Story proved that out. And so really then I kind of dug into that and thought about it. And this was the big lesson for me, was thinking about video games, specifically a single player video game. So if we discount the bigger kind of multiplayer games that are more like a sport and kind of behave quite differently, we think about the single player video game. This is something, think about the devices. I'm sat playing on my phone, sat on my PC, even on a console, sat on a sofa. Oftentimes, this is a solitary experience. The relationship between the game and player is one-to-one. It's very close. It's very intimate. And so when we think about making a game and how to go about conceiving and building a game, for me, it's much closer to how we might think of a novel. That level of kind of connection and intimacy than, say, a movie where we're playing to a crowded audience and it's a kind of larger spectacle. And if that's the kind of relationship we're trying to build, and for me, the only way to make a video game is to listen to myself, make something that directly follows my own curiosities, my own desires. And the more specific and the more particular I can make a game, then the greater the chance that when the game is finished and released, there will be people out there for whom that game really resonates and delights. And so really that's been my big learning. I think this leap to digital distribution has enabled us to really connect with the idea of a video game as a very intimate, specific form of entertainment. And the only way to make something that at the end of the day is going to blow the mind of your audience is to make something very specific and personal, to think about the game you want to play that doesn't exist and then pull that into existence. And always use your own head and your own heart as the way to check if this thing is actually on track and working.
Okay. Again, I will email Sam and let him know you clapped. Carolyn, please come join us and share your wisdom.
Oh, that's a big word. Hello. I don't have a super insight on the industry. I just want to share a personal insight today with you. Which is why, as a creative, I also enjoy being a CEO. 8 years ago, I had a very cool idea for a game that I believed in. And 6 years ago, I decided to try and go and do my own company with a 4-year-old and a newborn. I started the company on the internet, but I didn't want to be a CEO. I just did it because I had to. But my friend Dave Runyard said, no, you should still be it. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And then someone will take over. So we went on pitching, like with a newborn on the lap, sharing earphones in a cafe. We assembled like a super cool team. And once we signed a project, we started a studio, and now there's 50 of us. So I ended up doing loads of things that creatives usually don't do. And I probably made loads of mistakes, but we're still here now. And I didn't want to be a CEO, but now I wouldn't give up my seat to anyone, even if it's stressful, because being a CEO just empowers you and allows you as a creative to take the studio and your game in the direction you want to. It's very empowering, and it gives the team stability and clarity. Got this very game, As Dusk Falls, which is coming out very soon, canned twice in the past. It happens to a lot of us. Like great ideas, great games, great prototypes get canned for loads of different reasons. But I decided to carry on instead of pivoting twice because I'm stubborn, but also because I saw the game working with players. And so I'm very proud as a CEO to have been able to keep the team whole and looking in the same direction during these 5 years we've been working on this game. And the game hasn't changed since it was from what it was 5 years ago. We just finished it. And I'm also super, super proud of having assembled this team of lovely, talented people. So this is it. This is why I think it's worth it.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Next guest is also by video. It's Aaron Flynn, formerly of BioWare, now of Inflection Games. Here's what he had to say.
Hi, everybody. I'm Aaron Flynn, CEO here at Inflection Games in Canada. I've been building games now for just over 20 years. And when I was given the opportunity to think about some lessons I've learned, some hard lessons, the one that I wanted to share with everybody here is the notion that things are quite often easier done than said. And I know that's a flip on the usual statement of easier said than done, which tends to be the sort of response to when somebody is overreaching or inexperienced and not thinking about something. But the notion that some things are easier done than said has always resonated with me, first from my time at BioWare, where we were always, I think, pretty good at trying to get into things and solve problems. I credit our founders, Ray and Greg, with that. As medical doctors, they certainly knew how to strike a balance between learning about things and understanding the situation, getting a good diagnosis, but then from there, never being shy about being hands-on, about being reactive and supportive in that regard, to make sure that we had the best information possible, but then executing and going towards things and doing it. Here at Inflection, I try to embrace a similar philosophy. We have such great tools nowadays as developers. There are more qualified developers in our industry than ever, which is awesome. And so many things that we can spend a lot of time arguing about, debating, and wondering what the truth of something is, we can actually take steps to actually resolve ourselves through playable, provable prototypes. And so easier done than said is really about that. A lot of times we talk ourselves into the notion that things are too difficult. We're going to talk more and share more and maybe learn more about something. But at the end of the day, decision-making is about information, not about time. And so a lot of times a playable prototype, something that is physical and interactive like that, gives us the information we need when we're trying to seek a decision. So easier done than said, a lesson I've learned the hard way in my career, but one I really want to embrace and share and encourage others to think about too. Thank you.
Our next guest is Rami Ismail, who is slightly further back in the room. So thank you, Rami.
Oh boy, this thing is very low. Hi. Wait, can I just, if I just speak loud, can you just hear me? Okay. Hi, my name is Rami Ismail. I'm an independent game developer. I don't formally have a title at the moment, so it's just me. The lesson I learned in games was actually kind of a very simple one, which is that one of the best statements you can make in games, if you want to do something cool, you want to change the industry, or you're a minority, or whatever it is just both the privilege and the courage to just stay, to just be here. And throughout my career, a lot of what I've been working on, I realized as I was thinking about this, was trying to make sure that good people have the tools to stay here. And as an industry, I think we've slowly gotten better, but there's a lot left to do. We have started talking about crunch, and we've started talking about working conditions. We've started talking about mental health. We started talking about representation, about marginalization, about making sure power structures are fair. But ultimately, they're all saying the same thing. that we want good people to stay. And that one of the most powerful things that we have in this industry is just the ability for, to me, it feels like, as an Arab man who grew up in the Netherlands and never felt like there was anybody that I could look up to, that looked like me, that sounded like me, that spoke my language, to stand here and still be part of this industry. So when you work in this industry, don't let anybody do anything that damage your ability to stay. If somebody tells you to overwork, it is never worth it because it might damage your ability to stay. If somebody is giving you shit, talk to people and make sure that they end up paying for what they're doing. And then as an industry, make sure that those people have a place to go to, that we also fight for other people's ability to stay. It can't just be about us, it has to be about everyone. So, with you having stayed as a website for, 20 years? That's cool. Some of the people that spoke here have been here for so long that they might have been here before I was born, which is wild. But the most important things is that those lessons that come over time, those experiences, those perspectives, that ability to pay it forward, comes from their courage, their ability to stay. And not everybody will have that power. Not everybody will be able to do that. There's also no shame in folding, in giving up, in wanting out, because this place can be awful. But if we can make it easier for people to stay, for good people to stay, that is probably the best lesson I've learned in this industry. That's worth it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rami. That was brilliant. Thank you. Okay, next up, also a man with no title, Ian Livingstone, industry veteran and man of many board games.
Hello, my name's Ian Livingstone. I've been in the games industry some 47 years since co-founding Games Workshop in 1975. And during those 47 years, I've seen a lot of things, made a lot of mistakes, and learned quite a lot, which I'd like to share with you today. I think there are three main things I like to focus on. One being intellectual property, the value thereof. The whole value of Games Workshop was built on owning and creating Warhammer. You see the shops being rebranded as Warhammer shops these days, and it's not just the direct revenue that comes from the IP, it's all the incremental revenue coming from licensing and merchandising. Owning intellectual property is fundamental to the value of any company, and the greater multiples of value will be established through that IP. Too often the case is I've seen IP being traded away for project finance, whereas the content creator is not realizing full value. And my wholehearted recommendation would be to move farther up the value chain of ownership of IP and have a greater share of the value that you have actually created. So hang on to it for as long as you can. Secondly, do not be afraid of failure. Failure is just success, work in progress. And there are many ways you can fail, but there are many ways where you can stop yourself from failing. And one being is to take investment. Often with the creative interests, creative entrepreneurs tend to want to own the whole thing themselves. They're sometimes put off by having equity partners in their business for fear of having to report and be accountable for their actions, whereas investors tend to want to be joined at the hip with the investee company because they're aligned on the back end and hopefully sharing in the success. And having investment in your company allows you to do the job with the right people in place, give you enough cash runway to be able to realize your ambitions and ultimately be successful without having to panic or, as I said earlier, trade away your IP to get project finance. It gives you a foundation on which you can be ultimately successful. And I think the last thing we should concentrate is that partnership arrangement. As a creative entrepreneur myself, it was important to partner with somebody who knew the business side of the game industry at least as good as I am, perhaps better. But that joint partnership has always been successful to enable each other to do the jobs they should be doing. There's no point in the creative director, owner ordering the toilet rolls, doing the VAT returns, doing the fundraising, when it can be better done perhaps by an equal business partner. And on that same basis, there's no reason, and nor should you ever let the business director decide what their product's going to be, because they tend to make something that was popular last year rather than what might be popular next year. But this is an amazing industry that we find ourselves in. The games industry goes from strength to strength. It's a $200 billion a year industry, 3 billion people playing it. Games as a service now enable companies, no matter where they are, to reach global audiences through whatever digital platform they care to use, whether it's PCs or mobile or digital consoles. The world is really your oyster. The traditional gatekeepers of distribution are no longer there. And with the right ideas, the right backing, the right entrepreneurial mindset, there's no reason why you can't be successful in whatever you might do in this incredible industry. All the best for the future, and I wish you all number ones in your time. Thank you.
Next up, please welcome Alan Cadicchio.
Thank you. So I had some very nerdy design topics in mind, and then I realized maybe I should do something a bit more personal, and I'm glad listening to the wonderful speakers before. So I want to talk about what happened in the last, at least 10 years for me, 20 years around culture. And specifically the fact that people often come to me and ask me, how did you build an MMORPG, gaming fantasy company that's mostly women, like the design team is only women. It's something I'm really proud of. But there's a lot of good, fun, nice, positive tips I could give, and that's great. But I want to give a bit of tough love on this, and I want to go back to my experiences and situations where I started jobs in the industry, hearing like some negative slur as a Black gay man on the first day. I've literally had that, and HR not doing nothing, things happening. And I remember at some point swearing to myself, whenever I become a manager and then later CEO, I'm never going to let this happen. Like, I'm going to fiercely defend anyone in my team. I'm going to be like a mother bear with cubs. And I did it, So one thing I learned is that, for instance, firing is not always a bad thing. Like, it's in general, I'm in favor of labor laws and protecting employees, and you shouldn't fire for bad reasons. But also sometimes, if red lines are being crossed, you can educate, you can teach, but if red lines are being crossed, just fire that person. Protect your team. Protect those weak people, those introverts, those minorities. I've got stronger in ways that I shouldn't have, but I don't want everybody to go through that. So I will fire sometimes, and you should as well. Thank you.
Okay, next up, another video. We have Shalaramanan.
So my one big thing, I was thinking about this, and I don't really have one thing. So I've come up with 3 things that are kind of connected, and they all happen to begin with P, which is completely accidental. I didn't plan that. So my 3 things are passion, people, and persistence. And they're probably quite self-explanatory. But yeah, so I suppose throughout my career, these are the 3 things that I think have kept me going. So passion, I find that thing that you are passionate about in games, that thing that you want to inject into games in some way, whether it's the way they're made or the thing that it's about, or some innovation you're passionate about, something that drives and motivates you and keeps you going. For me, it's telling marginalized stories, whether it's a personal one like Windrush Tales, or it's someone else's untold story like Sunita in Before I Forget. Find that thing that drives you. And then once you found that thing, find people, surround yourself with people who inspire, support, and challenge you. Because they're the ones that are going to help you when you get stuck, because making games is hard, and you'll need those people to just like keep you going, to bounce ideas off, whether they're people that you work with directly, if you're hiring, if you're running your own studio, if you're an indie, you can cherry pick those people. But sometimes if you're working for an employer, you might find them on your team. I have them on my team, so I'm lucky. But if you don't, you can find them in your wider network. But find those people who will help sustain and challenge you. Challenging you is a really important one. And then my final P is persistence. And because, like I said, making games is hard, so you need that passion and those people for when those moments when you lose all hope, when it seems too difficult, or someone tells you your idea is crap, but that passion will convince you that it is something worth pursuing and finishing. And if you are passionate about it, then it will resonate with someone else. So those are my 3 Ps that make up my big one thing.
We go straight into another video. Shahid Ahmad. No, we don't, because I didn't put his video in the presentation. That's all right. I'll show it to you another time. I'll apologize to Shahid. Gina, come join us.
So I wasn't going to say how long I've worked in the industry, but I'm going to own it. And I'm going to own that I've stayed here for 30 years. And 20 years ago, I just moved from console to work for Nokia to do WAP and mobile games. Why? Because they were hitting 125 million people when we embedded a game in a phone. So I want to talk about social acceptance of games. 20 years ago, we were at the tail end of whiz kid done good stories in the press, and how video games are the cause of violence in young people, ramping up to the cause of mass school shootings. Now it's loot box and game addiction. Our failure to cut through in mainstream media does impact how the general public see us, both as an industry and as a cultural medium. Last year, the Mental Health Foundation did a study looking at mental health, games and COVID. Many positive links were made in many sets of research around mental health and playing games during lockdown. But one thing they discovered in that piece of research was a stigma around older people playing games. And when I'm talking about older people, I'm talking about those over 24, not old like me, over 24. And when they play games or they discussed playing games with their friends, they felt shame. They talked about being ashamed of what they did in their own time and how they couldn't talk about that publicly. So my advice to developers, publishers, and all those working around the sector is to find those stories, those individuals who can cut through, who can be our cultural ambassadors for games, not to shy away from the discussions or prejudice about what we do and how we do it. Imagine being in a society where politicians were happy to discuss the games they played, were happy to be with a game developer or an esports star in the same way they're happy to meet a film or TV star. Where our government, and I'll talk from a UK point of view, were funding and supporting that came directly to groups who knew about games, not maybe other ones that were headed by mediums that are different from games and maybe didn't understand or accept what we do. Imagine if the BAFTAs or the Development Awards were televised, that games review shows were back on TV. Imagine if the CEO of BAFTA was from the games industry. Imagine telling someone you just met what you do, and they weren't apologetic that they didn't play games, or in most of my case, put their hands up and go, okay, you do what? So imagine if the BBC decided to put games under entertainment and art, not technology. So I think this is a moment where I wish we'd spent the last 20 years trying to find those cut-throughs, trying to find those cultural ambassadors who can talk about what we do. We focus a lot on what we deliver as an industry, but I think we need to look outward from that and talk more than just about how much money we make. Yes, everyone knows we make more money than film and TV, but do we have a bigger cultural impact than they do? So that's my advice.
Thank you so much, Gina. Thank you. I have, during Gina's speech, I have just found my notes from Shahid's video, which obviously I haven't been able to show you. He said, if you love what you do it. You don't look for permission. Only you can make the thing that you love, so make what you want and make it unquestionably yours. He also started his video with, "There are too many video games," and he's right, please stop making them. Next up, we have AJ Grant-Scrutton, CEO of Delilah Studios. I'm going to turn this down because AJ is loud. Oh, no. It's just a picture. Why is he not? Let's just leave AJ like that, shall we?
Hello, everyone. This is AJ Grant-Scrutton, CEO of Delilah Studios. First of all, a big happy 20th birthday to GamesIndustry.biz, and thank you for letting me be part of this. Sorry I can't be there in person. So when looking back over the last 20 years of the games industry and trying to think what top tip I could give from the perspective of a studio head, it'd be all about the people. This is at both a studio level and a project level. Nothing is more important than the people you work with and the people you hire. So with this in mind, it's all about hiring right, not hiring quickly. It can be very easy when you have gaps on your team and in your projects to try and fill those gaps as quickly as possible, but it's really important that you find the right people to fit those gaps. You want to bring someone in who doesn't just have the right skill set, but also is complementary to the rest of the team. This doesn't mean finding identical personalities and attitudes and tastes. What it does mean is that anyone you bring in should disrupt your team in a positive way. You don't want to bring in somebody that's a clash of personalities that causes distress in your team. Instead, it's all about just focusing on building that big family together. So yeah, my top tip from the last 20 years is hire right, not quickly.
I was worried I'd lost Stefan's video as well, but I haven't. It's here.
Hi, people who are attending Develop Brighton event. I hope you're having a great time. My name is Stéphane Destou. I'm from Montreal, and I've been in the tech gaming industry for the last 30 years. So when James from GamesIndustry.biz asked me if I was ready to do a little video about the lessons learned of the last 20 years, in my case anyways, I said, let's give it a try. And so in the last 20 years, I worked at Ubisoft Montreal, founded IDOS Montreal, where we worked on this little project, by the way, as a launch project. Also founded Square Enix Montreal. And since then, I've been working in the mobile, MMO, VR, and also the metaverse in those types of companies. So I guess I've been a little bit around. And when I tried to identify some advice, I wrote down a lot of things, but there were two things that really stuck out. Those types of phrases I repeated to my staff quite often are two things. Don't believe in shortcuts. And second of all, do your homework. It seems quite basic, but you know what? If you do both, you reduce a lot of time. You reduce a lot of rework and frustration. And when I say shortcuts, a lot of people believe that they have a better way, a new way. I'm not saying that there's no innovative way to approach a project, but you know what? Great shortcuts don't exist. The path to success is not a short one, and you need to work smartly and with a lot of teamwork. And the other one is the homework part of my advice is that you need to be courageous and to uncover all the stones that are in your path. You will be faced to try to answer questions that you're not ready, you don't know, but the simple fact of knowing all the risks is already a good head start. So you need to ask yourself a lot of tough questions. You need to get out of your comfort zone. You need to not, because all this will reduce improvisation. And improvisation in business is a killer. When you're not ready and you react and you do not anticipate, that's when you're losing ground. So basically what I told to my people is don't believe in shortcuts. That's an illusion. And second of all, please do your homework. So there you go. I hope it was some sound advice. Take care.
Okay, Chinja.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, by the way. Compared to all these people, I just feel really privileged to be here. My big thing that I kind of learned in the past few years is about empathy and about very much stretching that skill. Because the thing with empathy is that we think that it's something that you either have or don't have. But empathy is actually a skill, and it's a skill that you can work with. And like every other skill that you gain, the more you work on it, the more you kind of like stretch it, the better you get at it. And so if you start speaking to people around you and kind of like learning their stories and looking at like what they're doing and what their life has been like, you're going to get better at empathy. But in the process of that, you'll be learning about other people's experiences and what their life has been and everything else. And that's such a great source of creativity that we can then take to our games and just make everything we do better. But on top of that, with that empathy, you then can, make sure that the people around you stay, like Rami was saying, and that you keep the right people or you fire the people that shouldn't be there. That empathy skill can just take you so far, and it will, make all of us much better for it. So that's my advice.
Thank you, Chinja. Last video comes from Sitara Schefter.
Hello, I'm Sithara Schefter, Head of Studio at No Breaks Games. One thing that I've learned over the last few years is that it's okay to do things differently. Just because something might be the industry standard practice doesn't mean it's actually the best way forward for you, your team, or your game. We're all incredibly creative people in games, and sometimes we need a little more creativity when it comes to our processes and best practices too. For instance, during the larger part of my career, teams I've worked in have used processes like sprints and agile, which are probably words you're familiar with because they're often the proven or tried and tested methods. When we first started working on our current project at No Breaks Games about 3 years ago, we adopted these processes too, as it's what most of us knew from our past roles. But about a year into development, we realized we weren't really succeeding. We were failing at things like our sprint goals, which then didn't make us feel great. And we realized we felt too constrained by time pressure or arbitrary deadlines. And this didn't help us to do our best work. So after a bit of conversation and research, we moved to lean development, which is used in quite a lot of other software industries, and found some great gains in quality, but also at the same time a loss of momentum because features would come in too independently of one another or too staggered. And that made it quite hard to take a step back and look at the game as an overall product from the player's perspective. So after a few months, we shifted to our current approach, which is a bit of a hybrid method. So we're kind of somewhere in the middle now. It made me learn that as developers, we should be more open and creative thinking when it comes to our processes too. And sometimes it's better to ditch the norm because it helps to boost our quality, our momentum, and our team morale. And it's taught me as a developer to be a lot faster and braver at challenging things, even if they are considered standard practice in game dev. It also applies to my role as a studio head. The main focus of my role is to always be empowering and facilitating my team in order to bring out their best work. But I also love the many other hats I wear. And some days I'm also the game director, the producer, the game designer, or whatever the team in game needs me to be on that day due to the same philosophy. Finally, I believe this flexibility also applies to many of us in our experiences working from home over the last few years. We've all had to find new ways of communicating and working together from home. And as an industry, we've proven we can adapt and make great games in unexpected circumstances. So, as a studio, we've embraced this philosophy, and I believe you should give people as much trust and flexibility as you can, so that they can work from anywhere they need or in the circumstances that they need to. As long as you give people the trust and flexibility, I believe you'll always get the best results. So all in all of this has taught me that creativity and an open mind are sometimes, if not more often, important than what you think you know. I've learned to challenge the norms in everything we do, because standard doesn't always mean it's best for you, your team, or your game.
Grand finale. So, Noreen, thank you.
Thank you, James. I have so many lessons that I have learned over the 34 years I've been in the games industry. But I'm going to, unlike Ian, I'm going to just give you one. In 2012, which of course was the 10th year for GI.biz, I've chosen a lesson that I learned during that time. At Revolution, we had been published by other companies. We weren't self-publishing up until that point, but we decided that we would fund and publish Broken Sword 5. So we decided to use the Kickstarter to go to our community and ask them to help us and to fund it. And we were pleasantly surprised that they really did come back, and we had reached our contract, I think something like 14 days in of the 30 days. But what we had promised, because they had funded it, is that we would keep in touch with them and send them some art and so on. So we had sent them an image of our main character, George, and we weren't entirely happy with it. It was a very early stage, and they came back and said, he doesn't look like George, his chin is wrong. And we thought, okay, we changed it. The artists weren't very happy doing it, but we did it. We sent it back out, and they were so pleased that not just did they feel they were part of the project, which of course they were because they were part funding it, but they also were really delighted that we were listening to them and that they were truly, involved in it. So part of the promise also was that we would give them a DRM-free disc. And we were with our publisher at the time that was going to do the physical PC sales was Koch Media. And for I don't know what reason, I can't remember, they could not provide DRM-free discs. So we had this dilemma, we had to release the game. We didn't have time to think about what we were going to do. So the boxes went out with, a restricted DRM. And I remember Charles and I went to France for a holiday thinking, wow, that's great, we've got it out. And the audience were not happy. There was a lot of backlash, and they were really cross. Those really dedicated people that like to, swap around in different machines and so on. So we had to really think about how do we fix this. So we spent a lot of time trying to source a production company that would actually produce DRM free. And actually it was quite difficult. We couldn't believe that it wasn't an easy thing to do. We found a company, and then we decided that we would we'd go back to the community and say, send us your email. If you want a DRM free disc, we're having them pressed, we will post it out to you, which we did. And again, not only were they really delighted, but they were posting about how we communicated with them and that we were listening to them. So my big lesson is respect your audience and engage with them, but allow them to criticize you if you're not doing the right thing. And we learned a big lesson from that. And we have a very, very dedicated audience.
Thank you so much, Noreen. At this point, I was then going to recap with like a one-sentence summary of everything everyone said, but I think we've all been in this room far too long. So I'm going to leave you with this. The mathematically astute among you may have noticed that is only 17 people giving lessons, and across them doing considerably more than 20. It's also definitely not been a 45-minute session. So my lesson would be always keep an eye on the scope of your project, because it's definitely going to get out of hand. Thank you so much, and please thank you my speakers and my guests.